Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
Hello, Susan.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
I'm great.
You're drinking coffee. It's in the afternoon.
I know. And it's like 118 degrees outside, but it's hot coffee.
And you're drinking coffee. Yeah, I just ran into one of our coworkers downstairs. It's 118, and he's heating up soup. So
we're Phoenicians. We do it, right?
I mean, I could go for a nice cold lemonade maybe, but I don't know if I could do coffee when it's this hot out.
The AC in the building is so cold.
That's true.
People are wrapped in blankets here.
It never seems to, well, it's good. It's like a little igloo in here. I kind of like that. Hey, today we're talking about two of my favorite topics.
Ooh.
Not NASCAR. That's another favorite.
Okay.
But money and real estate. Love both those topics.
They're super interesting
Yes.
and can go in a million different directions.
Right, exactly. So as you know, I mean, we both live here in the Valley. It seems like the real estate market here is just up, it's down, it's up, it's down. Right now, at this current level, we have absolutely no inventory, which means hardly any houses for sale. And it's the basic supply and demand. When you have very little of something and people want it, the price goes up. So that's where we're at right now. But
it's a challenge for people who are home buyers, but then you've also got the real estate agents who are kind of scrambling for business, which is where we're starting this conversation today.
That's the podcast that we're doing today. We're talking about realtors, real estate agents, and are there too many?
It's a good question.
Or are there not enough?
It's a good question.
For the answer, we're going to go to Steve Brobeck, who's with the Consumer Federation of America. It's a nonprofit aimed at educating consumers on a wide variety of subjects. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Good morning. Good afternoon.
You're in D.C., correct?
We are.
And real briefly, how's the housing market in D.C.? Is it through the roof, or tell us?
There's a little more inventory than there is in your parts. Still, things are tight all over.
Things are very tight. And yeah, the interest rates not really helping things. People don't really want to jump into the market. But you did some, Consumer Federation of America did some amazing research regarding real estate agents and the number of them. And I think the research reveals there are too many real estate agents in the nation. What does that mean? And why is that a bad thing?
Well, a number of real estate agents and real estate leaders actually agree that there are too many agents. There are between 1.5 up to 2 million residential agents with licenses who they may not be full-time. In fact, most of them are not full-time, aggressively marketing their services. But, you know, when a friend or a relative or someone they know wants to sell a house, they sell a house. And then there are normally 5 to 6 million sales. As you noted, because of the low inventory, it's probably going to be under 5 million this year. So do the math. What does that mean? You have two sides on a buyer side, a seller side on each sale, and let's say they're 10 million. 10 million, 1.5, 2 million agents. That's one sale every 2 months. That's not a full-time job. However, so what do the agents do? They have to spend their time desperately seeking clients, except for a small minority, who are very popular. And as a result, if you're a new agent, your net income is going to be in the first 2 years under $10,000. And even if you're after 5 years and you're a sales agent, not a broker, your income is going to be, net income is going to be under $30,000. That is not enough to support a family. And as a result, there's a huge turnover. And this leads to a number of problems for both the industry and for consumers. For consumers, you are often likely to get an inexperienced agent who doesn't really know what they're doing. Well-established agents complain about this all the time, that they have to carry the sale. They have to split the commission, but they're basically doing all the work. So that's really the dilemma.
I've heard real estate agents say that to me before, that they've come into sales or even come into closings and the other person on the other side of the table is so woefully unprepared that it can't even continue. They have to kind of take a break, go back, get the actual paperwork, the documents, everything they need to even make it happen, make the closing day work.
Yeah, the word you used was unprepared, and it's not only unprepared, it's just ignorance. I think some of these part-time realtors, if you will, they just don't know what they're doing. And like Steve says, they're relying on the experienced one to carry all the water, which isn't quite fair. Let me kind of lay this out in context, Steve. I have a couple of friends. One is a full-time school teacher, but he does have a real estate license, and he does sell a house or a condo here and there. And that's what you're talking about, right? I mean, you've got these people who are doing full-time jobs, and they're just they have a little side hustle for real estate, and that's not really a good thing for consumers.
We have to keep in mind, this is actually a fairly complicated transaction. You're aware of that if you go through a closing and you sign all those documents. Very complicated. Moreover, a huge amount of money is at stake, not just the sale price of the house. The commission, let's say it's a 6% commission on, what's the average sale price in Phoenix now? Maybe, what, 500,000 or something?
About $500,000.
It's just under that.
Okay, so that's $30,000. Now, what can you do with $30,000? You can get a very complicated operation by a top surgeon. You can buy a car. It just doesn't compute. The commissions are way too high, and they're all uniform because there's essentially collusion within the dominant industry, and they basically enforce those norms of 5 to 6%. Because let's suppose a listing agent only offers, not if it's 6% overall, 3% to the buyer agent, offers 1.5%. Do you think that house is going to get sold? Well, I mean, it's shown even.
Yeah.
Often it will not.
Right.
Because you're asking the agent to basically cut their commission from 3 to 1.5%, and there's essentially an agreement among all of them that we're not going to do that. So as a result, when the seller's talking to the listing agent and asks about this, the listing agent says, "Look, this is just what the normal price is, and if you lowball this, your house might not get shown." And then they add, "But we're going to add this to the sale price," which means that the buyer's going to end up financing it anyway. So that's sort of the way the system works. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not really a free, competitive marketplace.
So we have experienced realtors carrying all the weight for inexperienced realtors when it comes to closing a deal. You have experienced realtors who are not making what they should be making because the other guys are nipping at the cheese. What other problems are created when you have too many real estate agents?
Well, yes. I mean, one thing is there's no relationship between essentially the agent's compensation and the quality of service that the consumer receives, because you get your license and you don't know anything, you charge the same price if you're a listing agent as the person who has 30 years experience, knows the industry backwards and forwards, and can get you a really good deal. It's the same price. It's crazy. It's if you take, one of the best attorneys in an area, who's now charging, let's say, $2,000 an hour, and you force them essentially to charge the same hourly rate as somebody just out of law school who doesn't really understand what's going on, very well. So this is why we have to basically, there are a couple of big lawsuits here that would make the industry more price competitive. We're supporting those. But what's behind all of this is what we call the surfeit of agents, or an agent glut. Because there's just so many agents competing for business, there's huge pressure to maintain the current commission rates. If there were 1/3 the number of agents, there wouldn't be that pressure, because there'd be enough for everyone enough sales to go around for the remaining agents. It's a crazy marketplace that is sort of unique in the United States.
So for those consumers, we have the ability to choose our own real estate agent, and I can choose a really good, really experienced agent, but I can't choose the person on the other end. Are there things that I can do as a consumer to try to make the transaction better, with this knowledge that we might not be dealing with somebody who has as much experience as I'd hope?
Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to do much about the commission that you pay. Because, we did a survey around the country a couple of years ago, and 3/4 of the listing agents said no, they would not negotiate their listing commission at all. However, what you can do is select a really good agent or broker. And to do that, we suggest that you go look at Zillow has a list of all the agents with qualifications. Redfin also has information. It's not Red.
There is a Redfin.
Well, there's Redfin has some information too, and but go to Zillow and look at that information. Pay particular attention to the comments from consumers. Not just this person's really great, but look for detailed comments about how the agent helped them. Then also go to their sales experience. Do they have a lot of experience in the last year or two? And that ought to be listed. If they don't have information or a listing on the Zillow agents, I'd be very cautious about using that agent.
Do you? Or let me ask you this. Have you done this type of research in this category before, or is this the first time? Because I have a feeling a lot of real estate agents are going to think that we're picking on them, particularly the ones with less experience and are doing this as a side hustle. But have you done this research before in the real estate market as far as number of realtors?
Well, actually, we haven't. I started doing research in this area 30 years ago, but it was mainly on representation and also on the commission levels. So this is relatively new. And the reason that I decided to do it is because I concluded that so many of the other problems affecting consumers in this industry are because there are just too many real estate agents.
Yeah, good point.
So I was actually the first condo that my husband and I purchased. We ended up we just targeted that one condo. We saw it. We knew that was our condo, and we went and looked at it without a real estate agent on our behalf. And it turned out it had been on the market for like more than a year.
Wow.
It was a different time, right?
Yeah.
So when we first bought our first property, and that agent, the listing agent, agreed to be our buyer's agent too and cut the commission. So we ended up getting a good deal. We knew, we were doing a little wheeling and dealing, and the cost wasn't quite, as high as a single family home or something like that. But I'm curious if that is a smart way to go about negotiating, or if we made a mistake there.
Well, you may have gotten very lucky. Sounds like you got very lucky. I mean, normally you want to find a really good agent and then really depend on them and listen to what they say.
Well, you want an agent that's going to represent you. You don't want your agent to be more partial to the other party. So I guess that's why it's a good idea. But kind of on a side note, it depends on the real estate market that you're talking about. I mean, now, it's we haven't seen something like this in eons. But back in the day, anyway, the commission was negotiable. I was able to sell my house for 4%, with the understanding that my real estate guy was going to get me into the next house that I bought, and then he'd make up the 3% on that end. So it is negotiable. I did save some money there.
Sometimes. If you're Gary Harper.
Well, it was during the time when the real estate market was, not like what it is now. So I still think it's negotiable depending on the market. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Well, again, I go back to the study we did 2 years ago, and it was a more normal market than right now. And there were still about a quarter of the listing agents that we interviewed, and I did that as a consumer. They didn't know I was a consumer advocate who was doing research on them, and that they just said, yes, we'll negotiate. I'm prepared to negotiate that. So you ought to try to do that at least.
Yeah, it never hurts.
If you're a buyer, you ought to ask if you can get a rebate from a 2.5% to 3% commission. Most agents will say no. A few will say yes. And I believe that the rebates are legal in Arizona. In 9 states, they're not legal.
Hey, when you say rebate, you've tickled my interest. What does that mean? So you get to the closing table and,
what happens is, and nobody really asks about this because the buyers all are told, or there's an implication that the seller is going to pay the commission. So I don't really deserve any money back. But the fact is, the buyer's agent is going to get 2.5% to 3%. And in most states in the country, you have the ability to ask the buyer, think about a buyer getting 3% on an $800,000 home, $24,000. Would you give me some of that back? And some agents will do that. In fact, a few even advertise that they will provide rebates.
Can I just for the record say 6% is too high? I think 6% is way too high. If you do sell an $800,000 home, you're having to give up $48,000. That's a lot of cabbage.
It's a lot of money, but knowing what a good real estate agent does, that includes a lot of things. It's a ton of work. It's the really professional, beautiful photographs. It is
advertising.
It's maybe the staging involved. It does include things that you're getting for that money.
But who came up with this 6% rule, Steve? Why can't we just make it a 4.5 or 5%?
It actually all started 100 years ago when the industry developed a mandatory price schedule that every realtor had to basically charge the same thing. Then the U.S. Department of Justice sued them, and the industry said, well, we'll drop the mandatory price schedule. Now it's going to be a voluntary price schedule. This is like 20 years later. Department of Justice sued the industry again. So after several years, the industry said, okay, we'll drop the suggested price schedule. And now, however, there's no price schedule, but there's a broad agreement. We've done research, others have done research that shows how uniform the rates are in an area. They're probably in Phoenix, they're either 6% or 5% or in between that. But you very rarely get, except maybe on an expensive property, anything below 5%. So you essentially have a collusion. It's the culture, it's the norms of the industry, which can be enforced because it's a cooperative industry. Somebody doesn't toe the line, their property won't get shown, or they can't see a property. Well, lots of little subtle ways to discriminate against people, agents that will not essentially conform to the industry norms.
It's just like attorneys. They say we'll take 33% if we win. There's no hard and fast written rule anywhere that says 33% is the must-go-to number. But it's the standard industry, and consumers seem to think that is, the legal number. But you can negotiate that as well. Yeah. Just food for thought.
Well, that's interesting. I was going to say the comparison with attorneys. Attorneys have to get an undergraduate degree and a law degree and spend usually a lot of money to do that, right? You have a real estate agent who can be a high school graduate, can basically cram for an exam for 3 weeks, pass the exam, get their license.
Right.
High school graduate. Yet the real estate agent will charge much, much more than the lawyer will per hour, essentially. I mean, much, much more. We've talked to and we've read attorneys who get into real estate because they can make a lot more money, selling houses than they can doing legal work. Many people are not a great fan of the legal profession, but I can tell you that's very reasonable and rational compared to the real estate industry with prices that are actually reasonable. When we bought a property as a buyer, we used an attorney once, and the attorney charged us for everything, and he knew his stuff. He was a real estate attorney. He charged us $2,000.
Wow. See, I like that.
That's the money-saving hack right there.
That's more like it. Hey, Steve, there's 1.5 million residential licensed agents across the nation, and I believe Arizona has around 75,000. So of that 1.5 million, 75,000 are right here in the Copper State, Arizona. Are there states that came out in your research that were like really had too many agents as opposed to like other states? I don't. Maybe that's a question you can't answer, but did you break it down by states?
Well, no, but I can tell you generally what the correlation is. Essentially, if it's not a lot of sales and high price sales will generate a lot more interest among agents. For example, in one of the reports we did fairly recently, Florida had 3 times the ratio of agents to population as 2 other states, just normal states, 3 times. So, the competition there is going to be fierce. Why is that? Because growing number of sales at that time when we did the study, and also because the price of houses tends to be higher.
Well, I mean, when we had that giant real estate boom and, interest rates were at 3%, a lot of people did kind of try to jump into the industry to make a quick buck, right? There wasn't much work involved. So I think we're seeing kind of maybe the back end of that where the sales aren't happening as quickly anymore. And people are going, oh, this isn't the easy money-making thing that I thought it was.
Let's just hope we don't get to the point where we don't have enough real estate agents, because that 6% is then going to turn into 10% commission. Then we'll all be in a lot of trouble. Steve, it was great talking to you today on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to find out more about the Consumer Federation of America, where can they go? Is there a website, social media, anything? Because I love your organization. It does a lot, and I'm sure people can learn more. How do they find you?
Oh, I've just Googled Consumer Federation of America, and then if you're interested in all of our real estate stuff, and there's a lot of information on real estate brokerage. You just look at the issues. That's in the main menu, and under issues look for housing, and under housing look for real estate brokerage, and then you'll see dozens of documents. Too many for you to look through at any one time, but nevertheless, we address most of the issues that concern consumers in those documents.
Sounds good. Again, I always love talking about real estate, and once again, we have topped another one, so it's a great conversation. Steve, thank you so much for being with us on the On Your Side podcast, and have a great day.
Well, thank you.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.